Hello and welcome to this webinar in our e-commerce world review series webinars for November 2024. I'm Paul Skeldon. I'm one of the editors at RetailX and Internet Retailing. And we're here today to talk about connecting the dots, how to get ahead with retail media. I'm joined today by two experts in the field. So I'd like you to welcome Colin Lewis, who's Director at Retail Media Works, and Simon White, who's Sales Director for the UK and Nordics at Miracle Ads. Hi guys, thanks very much for joining us.
Cool. Thanks very much for having us. Delighted to talk to everybody today.
Hi Paul, yeah, thanks again for having us. Really looking forward to it.
Excellent. Well, what I'm going to do, first of all, for those that don't know, is just to give both of you the opportunity just to sort of say about what you do at your respective companies, just to give us a bit of context. So starting with you, Colin, for those that don't know you in the retail media space, what do you do at Retail Media Works?
Well, what we do is work with retailers to help them spool up their retail media networks, or if they have an existing retail media network, to grow to the next level. I also work with brands around the world to help them kind of navigate the way through both digital commerce and retail media, and to tap into the opportunities there. And also I write for Internet Retailing X on retail media as a columnist. So yeah, lots of stuff going on.
Absolutely, a veritable expert in retail media. And Simon, tell us a bit about what you do at Miracle and how that sort of pertains to retail media.
Cool, yeah. So Miracle as a whole is very well known in market as kind of leading marketplace or dropship solution, which empowers businesses to launch and scale their own marketplace and dropship business. And over the past few years, what we've done is expanded our product range by quite a lot, and one of those is our retail media solution, Miracle Ads. And Miracle Ads essentially enables retailers to effectively monetize their digital assets, including their marketplace. So we've built now an ecosystem for those that have, on e-commerce stores or marketplace or dropship businesses to monetize all of their brands.
Excellent stuff. So a pair of experts that I think there's probably no question you can't answer. So many of the people listening will know exactly what retail media is, but many probably don't, or have a vague idea, or need a little bit of insight. So I think to start with, Colin, what is retail media? How would you define it?
Well, great question to start with. I always think we should start with definitions to make sure everybody's on the same page. And actually, the definition of retail media is changing very rapidly. So the three different strands to think about when it comes to retail media. There's retail media on-site, retail media off-site, and retail media in-store. Now, where the majority of retail media is in on-site. And what does that mean? It's where retailers are monetizing the traffic, retailers, marketplaces, any business who has traffic to its website that it's monetizing it, and typically through search. So in other words, somebody searches for milk or bread on a grocer's retail e-commerce website, that they can monetize that traffic and turn it into ad units, and that are either search or display related, which we will get into the detail on that. Then when it comes to offsite, what we're doing is using the audiences that particular retailer has, and using that to target shoppers offsite, and that could be on social media, across the web, could be on connected TV, or could even be on digital out of home as well. So we're using the data, or the audience data as it's called, from the retailer. And finally, in store, it's where we're tapping into the traffic that's happening in store, and typically using digital screens that are that are being used to create ads that are tapping into the audiences or shoppers who are in store. And everything that I talked about, on-site, off-site, in-store, is built on two particular bases. One is the first-party data that the retailer would have, and the second aspect of that is the targeting and insight capability that comes from that. So in other words, targeting through the particular audiences, rather than being broad brush, we can break them into individual segments. And then, of course, through all of this, on-site, off-site, in-store, we actually have incredible insights into the shopper, what they're doing, how much they're spending, how are they spending, and where are they at within the customer journey. So that's the three kind of stools, if you will, of retail media, or three-legged stool, rather, I should say, of retail media.
Yeah, the three-legged stool of retail media, indeed, nice and stable. We can see on the slide on the screen some of the things that are involved in on-site, off-site, and in-store. Is that sort of what's in the box for retail media, Colin?
Well, it typically depends where the retailer is in their journey. They would start off with on-site, and they would work out how to monetize and that in-store traffic. And they would start off with, typically, would say, with sponsored search. They may end up doing things such as having a branded store or various other individual, if you will, ad units that are used to kind of deal directly with the traffic that's on store. Then they move into the in store. Then they move into the what are they taking those individual audiences and still using similar type of ad units such as sponsored search or maybe sponsored display, moving into obviously CTV and so on. Offsite. In store, what we're talking about here is typically in-store screens, but many retailers are also taking the previous, say, print things they were doing and wrapping them up into the world of in-store. That's the journey retailers will go on. Now, it's very important for us to think about this in two different ways. I've just been talking about the retailer there, and the retailer goes on this journey to move from on-site to off-site and perhaps in store. I should clarify one point is the majority of retail media is still of on-site. It is still how are we tapping into the opportunities with existing traffic from shoppers to our on-site store. So that is still the majority of what retail media is. However, on the other side, what about the brands? And I know we're going to get into the detail on what the advertisers are doing later. But one of the things I want to kind of ram home for our listeners today is that the brands have to look at retail media in a completely different way to how they might have looked at other digital advertising. They may be doing a comparison with Google. They may be doing a comparison with social media advertising. And retail media is a different thing because it's actually built on this idea of the data that the retailers have, which is this first-party data. And so from the brand's perspective, they're getting much better targeting, much better kind of insights into the shoppers, but particularly they're increasing their opportunity in a completely different way to build brands and build conversion. And this is the key why retail media has been so successful and grown so fast over the last couple of years. Instead of spending money on advertising on channels that are kind of removed from the sale, retail media actually can kind of build what we call a closed loop from the ad directly through the customer experience into an actual sale. So retail media is very important for that reason. It can build brands, but also build conversion, in other words, build sales.
Simon, I'd like to bring you in here. You work obviously with a lot of brands through Miracle Ads. What do you see as the sort of importance for brands and for retailers of retail media?
Yeah, and I think I want to touch probably mostly on the point that Colin just mentioned there about first-party data. I think it's a big key pillar here. You can see it quite prominent. And I think, as Colin mentioned, first-party data is the data that's collected by the retailer themselves, and it can come in a number of forms. For on-site specifically, it can be what products a customer buys or what types of pages they view. For in-store, it can be the data they use to sign up their loyalty program and even things like sensors monitoring the customer's movement around between aisles and that kind of thing. And with that data, this can be leveraged to create very personalized campaigns. And I think from an on-site perspective, those retailers that offer or provide the best opportunity for personalized campaigns are those that have that embedded into their algorithm. And I think this might come up in a little bit more detail shortly, but I think there are some instances that we've seen where CPC might be kind of trumping the personalization or relevancy of a product rather than the relevancy side of things. So by having, I guess, the first party data and the personalization embedded into the platform, you can use that to ensure that the product that's served or the ad that is served is the most personalized product that's specific for that user, rather than a generic ad based on a search term or generic ad based on a category. It is user based off of their behavior on the retailer's site. This in turn can significantly increase interaction rates with the ads, and also your kind of conversion rates and that side of things. And Colin also mentioned about, the audience segments and being able to focus on, specific demographics that fit the products. You can do things like location-based targeting, age-based targeting, loyalty program, and it just means everything can be a lot more targeted. And I think the other thing that Colin also mentioned is around closed loop reporting. And I think within using that data, you're able to track the entire kind of customer journey across all channels, on-site, off-site, and in-store. And that can be all the way from your very early stages of your awareness campaigns all the way through to the customer buying a product and even beyond that. And that's data that, brands have very rarely had their hands on before retail media networks were a thing. And I think it just paints a much clearer picture of campaign performance, and brands can then use that data to, constantly optimize and make better decisions moving forward with their campaigns.
Okay, great stuff. That's the sort of theory. In practice, how do you make this work? Turning to you, Simon, for the on-site side, first of all, how do brands actually optimize their way of doing this?
Yeah, of course. So I think many brands, and especially those that more mid to long tail brands, can often find themselves hidden far below the fold, or even on pages past page one, where their products are on the retailers. And the likes of sponsored product ads provides brands now with the chance to own some of the most premium real estate on retailers' site. Most often, that might be a number of slots that are above the fold. These are the products that you see before the customer's scrolling. By owning part of that digital shelf, you're increasing the likelihood that a customer's going to click the product and even purchase the product as well. Now, you can combine these with a number of other placements. So whether that's display banners at the top of the category page or the search page, whether that's video content, or whether that's even brand landing pages as well. This means that you can cover, again, that full funnel to not only increase the visibility of your brand, but also increase the sales. And retail media does have the ability to provide some very fast returns, but it's also important to monitor campaign performance through the extensive reports that these brands now have their hands on. You need to look at things like what keywords are performing well, which products are getting the most clicks, which banner messages generate the most interaction, and even what videos generate the most views. And this is where you can make better decisions to ensure that you're improving your campaigns continuously. It's much more of a kind of test, learn, and optimize side of things. And I think the retailers have a very important part to play in this for the brands to support them throughout that journey. And I think there's a lot of things that a retailer can do to support that journey. And I think, a few of them might be to provide a solution that has, and AI is a buzzword in the market these days, but have something that has an effective AI kind of automation campaign. One of the biggest hurdles that I've worked with brands over the past few years is your mid to long tail brands, for example. The biggest hurdle is just getting started. If you're able to provide them with something that's easy to use, self-serve, and can automate things like SKU selection, bid price, keyword selection, all brands can get started and they can start to see some return. Then they can use that data to learn, educate themselves, and then optimize things moving forward. I think having a variety of formats is also where the retailer can support them along that journey. And also having an effective algorithm that favors kind of your relevancy or personalization. I think we're going to touch on this subject a little bit more, but it's easy to fall into a trap of prioritizing the highest cost per click. It's actually what you want to do is make sure that all parties are able to win, the retailer, the brand, and the end consumer, by serving a personalized ad to that user.
Great stuff. And Colin, what about on the offsite side of things? How does that work?
Well, many of the things that Simon has been saying can be translated directly into the offsite world, but there's a couple of subtleties that we want to get into on the offsite side. So the starting point is for our audience to think in terms of the customer, customer funnel, the shopper funnel, if you will. Let's say takes an awareness, consideration, conversion, simple shopper funnel. If we take, say, what's happening on site, it's driven through search, and there's different ad units that work through that, and you can move the customer from awareness to consideration to conversion. However, when we are talking about offsite, obviously, clearly we are no longer on the retailer site. We are on the wider web. We're talking about targeting people through social media or connected TV. And the key point here is taking the audiences that Simon was talking about, and we're mapping ad units to those audiences. And this is where an element of that point around personalization kicks in as well. So what we're doing here when we're talking about offsite is we're targeting ad units, and typically these tend to be more, say, sponsored display or video or related to kind of standard stuff that we will see on social media, standard stuff that we'll see on the wider web, and obviously more recently connected TV, where we're actually using video style ads that are 10-second, 20-second, whatever, on TV. Now, the big difference is that we are using this in using that phrase again, closed loop. In other words, the person can see the ad on the wider web, or the person can see the ad on social media, or the person can see the ad on their TV channel of choice. And that interaction with that particular ad unit then gets linked directly to a sale. Now, anybody here who's listening would have knows how the world of TV advertising works, or say radio advertising works, or almost any other form of advertising over the last couple of hundred years, which is that the ad appears, but we do not have a direct link to the sale. We have to spend lots of time using econometrics and lots of other measures and proxies in order to work out how we got the sale. With closed loop measurement, particularly in offsite, we can actually prove that that particular ad unit has delivered a sale. That's completely, if you will, a game changer. And it's really why built into the whole world of retail media, we have so much excitement around it, which is this link directly from the ad unit, or perhaps even the number of times you have to show that ad unit to an actual sale. So this is why offsite is just as interesting as onsite, because actually the ad units are a little more what we'll call brand building units. And finally, it's also where a lot of the growth is occurring over the last while. This onsite, offsite, some of the growth is occurring in offsite because people are realizing that this closed loop piece is actually incredibly exciting from the brand perspective.
Great. And Simon, I see you nodding in agreement there. One of the things that you guys do, because Miracle's often is also known for its work with marketplaces. What's the sort of marketplace opportunity in this? But where does that sort of fit into the sort of kind of on-site, off-site mix?
Perfect. So, at Miracle, we've been part of, I guess, the growth of the marketplace model for the last 12 years since our inception. And we have said for a long time that marketplace is the future of commerce. And with the likes of your B&Qs of the world launching a few years ago, and their marketplace already making up 40% of their online revenue, and the fact that marketplace model growth is consistently outgrowing global e-commerce growth. Retailers without a marketplace are kind of potentially missing out on a huge opportunity. And what we're seeing is the same can now be said that for those that don't have a marketplace native retail media solution. I guess to put it into a bit of perspective, last year Amazon did about $47 billion of ad revenue through Amazon ads, and 90% of that was through their marketplace. So the thing about this is when most retailers launched their retail media networks a number of years ago, most retailers didn't have marketplace. So retail media solutions weren't built with this in mind. But when you do operate a marketplace, you require something that can effectively monetize hundreds or even thousands of sellers rather than just your top accounts, as well as being able to kind of cater for a rapidly growing catalog, which is very hard to ingest with some platforms. What this does is it kind of increases the opportunity for further profitability on their existing website. From a brand's perspective, this opens up a massive opportunity for having their products available now on retailers that perhaps they didn't have the option before, and having the opportunity to own a digital shelf on those new stores. And this, and I guess in general, has made a little bit of a shift of the growth for retail media networks, because typically before it was all about managed services, it was all about getting your top brands on board. It now sits a little bit more with looking at your mid to long tier, because you're going to have a lot more brands on your site. These advertisers typically are much more kind of pure incremental revenue, and the portion that they need to, or they invest, is a lot higher as well. On Amazon, for example, it's between kind of 5 to 15% of their online sales revenue that they've got to invest back into these retail media opportunities. So you need to have something that's super easy to use, self-serve, and as mentioned before, can provide the capabilities to automate them and just to get them started. Like I said, these extended brand catalogs just need to get started. They need to start seeing a return, and that's kind of where the marketplace side of things comes into effect.
Great stuff. Are we likely to see this on all marketplaces, do you think? Is it going to become a standard part of the marketplace play?
Yeah, I think so. I think we really see that, marketplace is kind of the future of retail media, and retail media is helping to grow the marketplace as well. So we kind of see them go really hand in hand, and to have, an effective solution that can monetize that effectively and help the brands to get on board, as well as looking after kind of your buy and sell and your first party products as well, is going to be key moving forward when a lot of retailers have marketplaces that account for so much of their online revenue.
Interesting. One of the things that attracts consumers to marketplaces is their sort of ease of use and the sort of experience they give. What about what's the sort of customer sort of shopper experience of retail media? I mean, how does that sort of get taken into account? What are some of the things that the people listening should be considering around retail media in terms of sort of customer experience, Colin?
Well, the key starting point there when we're talking about retail media, and there's a lot of chatter around this particular topic, by the way, which is this concept of ad load, which is a fancy way for saying how many ads have you got on an individual website, an individual e-commerce site. And this is kind of like a great talking point for people to think through, because obviously there's a crossover point on the shopper experience whereby you can have too many ads, too much stuff going on, and it annoys the shopper, and they don't buy anything, and actually they leave your business, and they don't come back, or they go somewhere else where there's less sort of intrusiveness. Now, there's a lot of talk around this, but in reality, what we need to do is actually take a step back and go, how do we actually create an experience that shows the products, taking Simon's point around personalization, shows the products that they want, products that they might be interested in, so in a curation context, but also then saying, right, how do we drive relevance? Because people don't mind sponsored products. They don't mind ads appearing on their feed if they are actually relevant to what the customer needs. And where the relevance is prioritized, then both the shopper gets what they want, the advertiser gets what they wanted because they get a higher conversion, click-through rates improved, and actually lower cost per acquisition as well. So that's why I think that the chatter around this is quite interesting, because it makes an assumption that we will just do anything and anything will happen. It'll be a free-for-all. No. What I would be saying to the retailers is, first of all, you need to think through relevance being the most important part, because what you want to do is do a win-win, where both the shopper gets what they want through the shopper experience and a reasonable ad load relevant to what they're looking for. And from the advertiser side, they get what they want because they get shoppers who are interested in this. So relevance is a filter for us to think through everything. Now, there's one other point I'd want to point out here. Well, actually, two relevant points, if you forgive the use of relevance in the sentence, is that actually we have a lot of people using Amazon as the sort of starting point when they're talking about relevance and saying Amazon's ad load is too high. Well, the point is, most of the people here are actually do not have a business like Amazon. Amazon is a very unique business that is completely different to anything else that's out there in the world. And we're typically, say, retailers running our own business, and we may have a marketplace associated with that. So our view on ad load and our view on relevance needs to be tailored to who our shoppers are, and not looking at what Amazon is doing, because that's an apples to oranges comparison. Now, one of the things, having said all that, is that there is a few papers written by Professor Colin Powell that I know out of the US, and he's actually done some homework on this particular topic. And the shoppers don't mind the ads at all. A lot of this conversation is actually couched in the context that people don't like ads. Well, that's not true. The data shows that they don't mind the ads, because if they are, guess what? Relevant, it's perfectly fine, because it actually helps them find the things they're looking for. So the onus is on the advertiser to actually make sure that they're appearing using, understanding the keywords that the shopper is searching for, appearing in the location, in the spot where the shopper is looking for that particular product. So that's why I think the conversation around ad load, relevance, and all that sort of thing is misguided. Once we see the world through this lens of relevance, then we solve a lot of problems.
Is that something you'd agree with, Simon? And sort of how, as a sort of technology provider, do you sort of help facilitate that? How do you help them manage that experience?
Yeah, and I couldn't agree more with, relevance has to be king in everything that we are talking about here. And it goes a little bit beyond just the relevance of the product being served in a particular ad slot. It can also be, relevance in having the right ad slots for certain customers and personalizing how many ad slots for a particular customer on a particular search term can happen as well. And it's something I hear quite a lot with retailers is, a bit of a frustration around kind of having fixed positioning. That can limit the number of ads on a page and can cap the opportunity for brands to kind of capture and serve personalized products for that customer. They're typically kind of set manually in the setup process, and it's just standard for every customer. So there's a lack of personalization from the actual experience of what users are seeing. Now, one thing as a tech provider that we're able to do now is look at making that positioning more dynamic. And what you're able to do is take this a step further by using AI to show the optimal amount of ads for that shopper in order to maximize ad revenue, conversion rate, and shopper experience. So as Colin alluded to, there's a bit of talk about ad fatigue. If a person's showing that side of things with their behavior on site, we can then look at reducing the number of ads that are being served them, for example. And what the retailer is able to do is use a scale, or like a sliding scale, for example, to, I guess, choose which KPI they'd like to maximize within certain categories. So for product A, for example, you may want to favor your organic products because selling that stock is a much higher priority. Therefore, the AI, based off of that particular shopper, may just show one sponsored ad in slot 9 because we want to favor our organic products here. Whereas for product category B, you may want to maximize ad revenue. In this instance, the AI tool then, based off of that shopper, may show 6 sponsored products within the first 9 products to try and favor that and serve the most personalized content to them. So I think personalization is now not only the product or the ad that's being served to that slot, it's actually the slots themselves or the opportunity themselves to make sure that experience is personalized to that particular user.
Interesting. I mean, you touched on there sort of how to kind of measure this. You're sort of looking at the kind of, in my way, measuring sort of the relevance and trying to prioritize and choose. Measuring the success of retail media is one of the kind of fundamental points, isn't it? It's how to understand what's happening and how to sort of compare, I guess, from one retail media network to another. Colin, what are sort of the key metrics and performance indicators that brands and retailers should be looking at?
Well, if we're talking about measurement, Paul, I think we need to extend out the call, the webinar for about another 6 hours, because this is the hottest topic.
Well, absolutely.
Yeah. And what I'd love for our listeners is to kind of make some distinctions in their mind around when they're thinking about measurement. So let's actually just take a step back and go where we have come from. So in the, I'm a marketing guy by trade, and when I think about my career in marketing, for the most part, a lot of measurement was not available to us. We had to do, like I was talking about earlier, use these proxy measures such as econometrics and so on. Then as we kind of rolled out and started using these incredible channels like Google or Facebook, and or Meta, I should say, where they've monetized their audiences and have given us lots of data around those particular interactions. We started getting into thinking through things like click-through rate, conversion rate, impressions, and all these sort of measures and so on. So what it did was actually give us a view that actually almost everything can be measured. Then that quickly moved into a discussion around attribution, because people realized, well, actually, hold on a second, that particular ad that I clicked on, was that really the thing that maybe to go and buy that widget? Well, maybe not, because possibly the TV ad, possibly the print ad, all these sort of things. And then we got into a world of discussion around attribution and thinking through that. So now that we know where we've come from, then how does this kind of measurement discussion, then an attribution discussion, if you will, apply to retail media? And is reason for this being a very controversial discussion is that many retailers actually are using slightly different measures, or they struggle to give the measures simply because sometimes the tools aren't there, and it does require a lot of resources and heavy lifting to make it work. So what I say on the brand side, and particularly from the advertisers listening here, I say, let's make kind of very straightforward in terms of your request to the retailer. And I want you to split it up, is what I say, to three different threads. So thread number one is you want campaign metrics. You want to understand things like, how much did we spend on that campaign? What were the impressions it delivered? What was the click-through rate? What was maybe the CPM or the CPA cost? And then, as much as possible, some level of attribution to that particular ad. So that's what we'll call the campaign measures. Then the second measures are what I call a set of revenue measures, which is, where possible, show us the total volume sold, whether it's new to brand, whether that was a repeat customer. And then the third level is a little more sort of related to revenue, is the overall results. What were the sales volume? What was the ROI? What was the ROAS? What was the return on ad spend? What was maybe the share of voice or share of sales for that particular category? So three different threads: campaign, revenue, and results metrics. And then we can get into a whole set of discussions around attributions. But attribution is a very long and complex discussion. And I would say to the brands, start with working directly with your retailers to say, I want these campaign measurements, I want these revenue measurements, and I want these results measurements.
Excellent. Simon, I assume you agree with all that. What can you do to help in that sort of measuring those attributes?
Absolutely, and I completely agree with everything Colin's just mentioned there. And I think it's just important, based off working with both brand and retailer side, I think it's to be able to measure it successfully as well. And this goes for all channels. I think, the brands really need to really think first about what success looks like for these particular campaigns as well. I think it's very easy to fall into a trap of creating all campaigns as equal and setting them live and just, sitting there staring at the return on ad spend figure in their dashboard. And I think, that can be easy to do. And I think that, as Colin went through, he just went through many different metrics that can be used. And I think, depending on whether you're doing an awareness campaign for a banner on site, for example, or a end of funnel when you're doing a sponsored product for the purchase, there's many different metrics that can measure success probably better or maybe slightly differently to return on ad spend. So for banners, it might be things like impressions or viewability. Did that person actually look at your banner for more than 1 second? For sponsored products, you want to look at your average ad rank, for example. Where did that product serve? Did it serve in the right ad slot that I wanted it to? If not, you can then look at the many different reports that platforms like Miracle Ads have to look at that data, and then again use that data to optimize your campaigns to ensure that that you're getting the most out of them. So I think, so it's very much a case of understanding what success looks like to then use the myriad of reports that you now have access to.
Simon, just taking that cue, as the veteran of many digital advertising campaigns, where I went wrong a lot of the time was I got straight into the detail, and I was like, well, look at that CTR versus that CPM. You go, what was that conversion rate? And I, if you will, nerded out on some of the detail. And what I realized, that was kind of like a wrong approach. I went straight into the detail, and really now what I've learned my lesson over the last number of years is actually always start with like, what's the job to be done, if you will. And rather than saying, what did that campaign do? What was this? And, moaning about attribution, whatever it may be, and just look at the wider world of what we're trying to do. What's the job to be done? So that's the first thing to go and say. This level of asking about measurement is great, but actually know what you want, because taking what Simon said there, that conversion rate might have been incredible given the job to be done, but that conversion rate might be worse than what you did last year. Let's just take, say, ROAS as the example. You might say, I want to report to the boss that my ROAS is ever increasing and always going up, and aren't we a great bunch of marketers? But in reality, if you've got something that's new in the market, or you want to kind of win market share, your ROAS should be lower. And you should be thinking about the world through that lens. So what's the job to be done? So then you can have a sort of adult discussion on the fact that your ROAS is down, and that's because you have this particular task that you're trying to do. So don't do that. And actually, Simon said earlier on one particular point that I really have to try and embed in our thinking, because it's another sort of black mark against me. One of the things I used to always do is go and say, we've got the campaign, let's get it out the door, let's let it run, if you will. And we had the whole year boxed off. And I still hear this from a lot of people I'm working with the brand side. It's like we're planning out the whole year as though it's one sort of perfect thing that's going to happen. And in reality, retail media forces us to go and think through the world through this lens of test and learn. And most recently, I was working in Australia and New Zealand, and I was working with a particular brand. And I said, we really have to see this, what you're doing, say, in Q1 2025, and taking those learnings, applying them, and saying, okay, well, maybe we'll kind of change our perspective then for what we want to do in Q2 2025, and so on and so forth for Q3 and Q4. If you're a sinner like me, what you would have done in the past is gone and said, I want to lock it in for the year, bish bash bosh, let's move on to the next thing. No, test and learn is the key thing that underpins retail media today.
You mentioned 2025 there. As we come to the end of our time sort of with this webinar, like you say, we could probably do a whole other one about measurement, and we probably will. What are some of the sort of future trends? I mean, obviously for some people who are just starting their journey, that might be a bit daunting as to the fact they might have to think of some other things. But what's some of the upcoming trends that brands and retailers should be focused on, do you think? Throw that out to you first of all, Simon.
I think a trend, and so it's kind of already started, but I think it's going to grow even more, is I think the change of the term from retail media to almost commerce media, or maybe in general just media, in the fact that there are other opportunities out there now for brands to look for, even other retailers in other industries, such as you're seeing things like airlines or hotels or quick commerce. And this opportunity of retail media is now becoming a lot bigger, and there's going to be more opportunities for brands to look at that opportunity to see if that fits with their plans moving forward as well. So I think that's one that we're already starting to see. I think, and I'll say this carefully because I think a lot of people use the word AI with not a lot of meaning behind it, but I think it's just other ways in which we can properly implement AI to automate things further. I mentioned that we're looking at dynamic positioning to change the opportunities available per customer. How can we further utilize that? Would it be something like a brand is able to go onto a retailer and create a banner with no copy? The AI will automatically choose that, create their images and create the copy that they're going to put on there as well. So there's just other ways that we can make it easier for brands to be successful on retailer sites.
Right. And Colin, what are your sort of predictions for the future? What's your crystal ball showing you?
Well, one key thing I really strongly believe is that retail media has barely started. People are just scratching the surface of what the opportunity is. And my work with brands and retailers says that people are it's starting to dawn on them what the opportunity really is in terms of both to add value to shoppers, but also add value to their own bottom line. The one area that is not as developed, it's very developed in Amazon advertising, but not as developed in other areas, is this idea of self-serve. And if we see the world through where retailers are today, they obviously have a certain amount of traffic and a certain amount of shoppers and so on, a certain amount of brands that they stock. If you then think in terms of, well, we would like more products and more brands, well, that's where they actually are thinking through the world with, I'll add a marketplace onto my existing retailer.com, e-com business. And then once you actually add in the idea of a marketplace onto what you're doing with your business, then you open the door to a lot more different types of advertisers and different types of products, and actually new innovative products that actually can really change the nature of the core retail business. And this is something that I find very interesting, is that by actually delivering a marketplace layer, if you will, over the on-site business, it opens up the opportunity for new products, which therefore new forms of advertisers, new types of advertisers, I should say. And therefore, the game, if you will, of self-serve will improve even more than where it is already, because the retailers need more innovative new products. They also obviously would like more advertisers. Marketplaces are the ideal opportunity for that. And therefore, the game around self-serve has to improve as well, because it has to be something that a person can use at their keyboard and get live in, and make their ads work.
Interesting. Excellent stuff. So much to look forward to in the coming sort of months and years. I think hopefully this has been sort of useful for those people out there. If you want to learn a little bit more, dive a little deeper into retail media, one of the resources you could use is the report we published earlier this year. There's a link there to download it. That goes into more detail on many of the things we've talked about here on this webinar, but I think we'll wrap it up there, as there's quite a lot there for people to digest. I think we'll need to get together and do more on this in the coming months, but for now, Simon and Colin, thank you very much both for joining us. Thank you for sharing your wisdom, and thank you everybody for listening, and we'll see you again soon.